Alright, let's talk about it. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. The game we were all waiting for, but also the one we were absolutely terrified of. Seriously, if you're a die-hard fan like me, you know this feeling. The original Metal Gear Solid 3 is more than just a game. It's a sacred text. Back in 2004, it was an experience that felt a decade ahead of its time. It was a huge part of the reason I got obsessed with video games in the first place, right up there with the original MGS1. The story, the characters, the pure, unadulterated Kojima weirdness, it all felt so untouchable. And when Konami announced they were remaking the most beloved entry in the series, without the maestro himself, Hideo Kojima, well, I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous. There was just so much room for error, for a studio to take this sacred ground and just butcher it. But here we are, and a lot has happened since launch. This isn't a first impressions video. This is our final verdict, a full-on post-patch re-review that's going to break down whether Konami honored this masterpiece or desecrated it. And what's wild is that the answer lies in the title itself, that little triangle, the delta symbol. Konami explained that it fits their development philosophy for this project, and that delta means change or difference without changing the core structure. That's it. That's the entire game right there. This isn't a grand reimagining like what Capcom did with Resident Evil 4. This is a preservation effort. It is, to borrow a phrase, slavishly faithful to the original. They didn't play games. They didn't try to make it something it wasn't. They just took the original, with all its brilliant quirks and some of its less brilliant clunkiness, and gave it a fresh coat of paint and some much-needed quality-of-life updates. The big question is, was that approach the right one? Let's dive in. The Unreal Shine, a visual overhaul that's both brilliant and uncanny. First off, let's talk about that new coat of paint. For my money, the character models here are a home run. I mean, they look fantastic. The level of detail on Naked Snake, the boss, and Volgin is incredible. But it's not just a graphical facelift. There's a new system at play here that I absolutely love, and it's all about illustrating your personal journey with Snake. Any damage he takes, whether it's a cut, a bruise, or a bullet hole, is now reflected permanently on his character model in real time. Crawl through the mud? He gets covered in dirt. Take a dip in the swamp? He's wet and muddy. It's a genius new feature that makes every playthrough feel uniquely your own, and it's a testament to the level of care they put into the visuals. But the environments are a bit more of a mixed bag. When you first drop into that jungle, it's a jaw-dropping experience. The dense foliage, the high-quality grass, and the way the Unreal Engine 5 lighting streams through the trees all make for a strong first impression that gives a real wow factor. It's a testament to the original level design, now rendered with modern technology, that these contained zones feel so immersive and expansive. However, as the game progresses and you move into more industrialized or indoor areas like Grand Gorky Lab, it feels like that attention to detail wears off a bit. These places, which felt cold and barren in the original, still feel pretty barren here. They're technically upgraded, but they don't really flex the new graphics in the same way the jungle does. This leads to a fascinating, and at times awkward side effect of the remake's core philosophy. The original game's story and characters were built on a foundation of melodrama and over-the-top zany campiness. And the original art style, while stylized, was expressive in a way that complemented that weirdness. With the new photorealistic graphics, some of that whimsy is lost. Seeing Ocelot's signature howl, or the Cobra unit's inexplicable superpowers, rendered with high fidelity, can sometimes feel a little uncanny. It's a conflict between the visual realism and the narrative absurdity, and it's a direct consequence of a decision to preserve the story's structure but change the art style. But they did throw us a bone. If the new color palette feels too sterile or loses the original game's feel for you, there's a fantastic legacy mode filter that makes the game look more like you remember. It's a small touch, but it shows a genuine understanding of the fanbase. Modern moves, old habits, a gameplay loop of contradictions. Now let's get into the guts of it. The gameplay. The original MGS3 was clunky, man. Snake's movement was stiff and jerky. So one of the first things you notice in Delta is how much smoother everything feels. Snake is less clunky and more fluid, and the seamless transition from a run to a crawl is just so satisfying. The game's control scheme has been modernized to feel more like a contemporary third-person shooter, similar to MGS5, which makes things like third-person aiming a lot more intuitive. You can still dive roll into a crawl, and the CQC system feels much less awkward than it did in the original. You can still choose to play with the legacy controls and a fixed top-down camera, but honestly, the new over-the-shoulder camera and modern controls are the optimal way to play. And holy smokes, the quality of life changes here are a godsend. The most impactful without a doubt is the new quick-switch camouflage system. Gone are the days of having to constantly pause the game to open a menu every time you change environments. Now you can simply hold a button on the D-pad and a small menu will pop up, letting you swap your camo on the fly. It's a simple change, but it completely respects the game's core stealth loop while making it so much more fluid and enjoyable. It's a perfect example of a non-invasive modernization that enhances the experience without changing the structure, in line with the Delta philosophy. But this selective approach to modernization also highlights the game's lingering friction. The cover system, for example, is still pretty cheap-feeling and unreliable. You walk up to a wall and just hope Snake locks into it like you intended, which can be frustrating in a tense situation. And while the quick camo system is brilliant, the survival viewer, the menu for healing and eating, is still a clunky, menu-heavy affair that requires you to stop what you're doing and navigate multiple screens. This is a direct consequence of the game's design philosophy. The developers chose to implement new controls and a handful of QOL changes where they felt it wouldn't disrupt the original's feel, but they left core, clunky systems like the menu-based healing untouched, likely because changing them would have required a more fundamental redesign. This is the trade-off of a slavishly faithful remake, and for some players it will be a point of contention. Still, the core stealth and reactivity of the game remains satisfying, and playing a more contained, old-school stealth game in the modern era is oddly refreshing. All of the old tricks and secrets still work too, so if you remember how to exploit the boss fights, you're in for a good time. The story, timeless, emotional, and unfiltered. For all of its graphical updates and gameplay tweaks, the one thing that remains the same is the story, and that's a very, very good thing. This game is worth playing for the narrative alone. It's a wild, crazy, Kojima-esque Cold War spy thriller with twists, turns, and over-the-top villains. But beneath all of that stone-faced goofiness and melodrama lies a surprising heart. The core themes of mentorship, betrayal, and a complicated relationship between Snake and the boss are timeless. Revisiting this story as an adult, I can honestly say it hits even harder than it did when I was a teenager. The emotional highs still hit as hard as you remember, especially during iconic moments, like climbing the ladder to an a cappella rendition of the theme song, or that final devastating conversation in the flower field. And the best part? None of it was censored or watered down. The long cutscenes are still there, the famously lengthy codec calls are still there. They are all preserved exactly as they were, which is a courageous, creative choice in an age of short attention spans. The developers understood that this wasn't just a game, it was a cinematic experience that helped pioneer the way games told stories. I also found that the new visuals actually enhance some of these moments. Seeing Snake's anguish or the boss's stoicism in high fidelity lends a new weight to already powerful performances from the original voice actors. For a story this good, the most faithful approach was absolutely the right one. The post-patch re-review, from a technical misfire to a rock-solid experience. Now, let's get into the real reason we're doing this video. This is the part where we have to be completely brutally honest. At launch, Metal Gear Solid Delta was, for all its creative successes, a technical misfire. Early Digital Foundry reports revealed a disaster across the board, with significant performance issues on both the standard PS5 and, bizarrely, the more powerful PS5 Pro. On the base PS5, the game offered a performance mode that targeted 60 FPS but would drop into the 40s in dense jungle areas and even into the 30s underwater. But the biggest red flag, the one that made the most headlines, was its dismal performance on the PS5 Pro. Instead of offering multiple modes, the Pro had a single mode that attempted to combine the high-resolution visuals of the PS5's quality mode with a 60 FPS target. This required relying on Sony's new PSSR upscaler, which, according to the analysis, didn't work as advertised. The result was a lower base resolution than the standard PS5, as well as noticeable artifacting and shimmering on certain surfaces. The most shocking revelation was that in some early areas of the game, the base PS5's performance mode had, on average, a 7 frames per second advantage over the Pro. This wasn't just a simple bug, it was a systemic issue that highlighted the broader difficulties of optimizing games on Unreal Engine 5, especially on new, untested hardware with unique upscaling tech. It felt like a rushed and unpolished product. But that was then, and this is now. Konami listened. They released a massive Delta patch that completely overhauls the technical side of the game. They fixed the issues, and the game now performs like a polished, modern title. Here's a quick look at the transformation. PS5 Performance Mode. At launch, unstable 60 FPS drops to 40s. Post-patch, locked 60 FPS with minor rare drops. At launch, unstable 60 FPS with significantly improved PS5. At launch, unstable 60 FPS with significantly improved PSSR and stability. Resolution. At launch, lower base res, shimmering on Pro. It runs beautifully on both systems and finally delivers on the promise of a rock-solid, high-fidelity experience. It's a rare and welcome redemption arc for a modern game. The final verdict: is it worth playing now? So, after all that, we come to the final question. Is this the definitive way to play Metal Gear Solid 3? For a new generation of players, my answer is an enthusiastic and unequivocal yes. This is, without a doubt, the most accessible and visually impressive way to experience one of the greatest stories in gaming history. All of the things that made the original a masterpiece are here, preserved and untouched, but now you get a polished, modernized experience with fantastic quality of life improvements. For veterans like me, this is less a replacement for the original and more of a big burst of modernized nostalgia. It's a loving, high-fidelity restoration of a masterpiece that honors the original without ever feeling like it's trying to replace it. It allows us to revisit a story we've experienced 100 times before, but with a fresh perspective that's surprisingly emotional. And to address the final part of our prompt, is this a niche title? In a way, yes. Its design can feel rather small in scope and not quite as expansive as it felt 20 years ago when compared to today's massive open-world games. But that's exactly what makes it so good. Its old-school puzzle-like stealth action is oddly refreshing in a modern landscape saturated with emergent, open-ended sandboxes. It's a niche, but a fantastic one. It's a game that had a rough start, but with the patches, it's now a legend fully realized for a new era. What do you guys think? Are you a die-hard fan like me? Or is this your first time jumping in? Let me know down in the comments below. If you liked this breakdown and want to see more like it, hit that like button, and if you're new, consider subscribing. We put out new videos every single day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.